Hey guys, Richard Metal Fan here, continuing the Slayer discography, and today we're going to be talking about Seasons in the Abyss. Now, throughout the 1980s, Slayer has been perhaps the leading force in extreme metal, while sort of their contemporaries like Metallica and Megadeth were gradually streamlining in the sound that would appeal to major audiences. And Slayer seemed to be doing anything to make sure they pretty much stood alone as apart from the other bands in the Big Four. And indeed, they did. While sort of their first two albums, Show No Mercy and Hell Awaits, were definitely feral and unrelenting and brutal examples of no frills thrash. And Rain and Blood also took those elements into sort of then uncharted territory. It was like a half-hour side of flesh-ripping sonic torture, dragging you in and pummeling you in with a psychotic, bloodthirsty frenzy, clearing out just as fast as it has arrived. And perhaps the band themselves realized they couldn't possibly top the speed of mayhem on Rain and Blood, and so their previous album, 1998, South of Heaven, was so confusing to sort of a lot of many fans because the songs were, for the most part, slower and sort of have a bit more of a doomy your kind of approach, and is a criminally underrated album in my opinion, but in my opinion it's one of their highlights. And then we go into a new decade. Now we're going here in 1990, with the revival of their overall fifth album, Seasons in the Abyss, which was their highest charting album at the time and sort of the best selling. And many fans have remarked it's sort of a middle ground between sort of the speed that was on Rain and Blood and sort of the slower, more sinister atmosphere on South of Heaven. And that's pretty much a good description of any. And I feel like that's sort of his kind of a Seasons in the Abyss is another classic in Slayer's discography. It's perfect, one of the best in there. Here, it's like I said, it combines sort of the has sort of slower doomy elements of like the previous album, South of Heaven, but the faster elements of Rain and Blood. Yeah, without further ado, let's dive into this track by track. Now, opening up this album is, of course, War Ensemble, which starts things off in fine form, perhaps one of the most recognizable guitar riffs next to Angel of Death, and is one of the fastest songs on the album and one of the longest. And Dave Lombardo pretty much proves once again why he's regarded as one of the best metal drummers of all time. And sort of while Tom Araya sort of screams and shouts over the racket, and the soloing from Jeff Hanneman and Kerry King are still pretty atonal and shrieky. But there's sort of subtle sense of melody section heard before and after on this album. Blood Red is sort of more of a mid-paced type of number with some very catchy riffs, but especially during the chorus in there. And the song concerns, lyrically, it's about the Tiananmen Square massacre in Beijing the year prior, 1989, which over 1,000 protesters were slaughtered. And this album is where Slayer's current lyrical fixation of tyrannical governments, social decay, and criminally insane sort of come back into sort of the full focus, abandoning sort of the Satanism on past albums. And Spirit of Black sort of makes a return to their early lyrical musings, and this song is also a fast-ripping example of this style of thrash. Tom's vocals are actually intelligible throughout most of the album, making the lyrics easy to follow. Expendable Youth sort of leads a tale of adolescence wasting away in sort of inner city gang violence. And tempo-wise, it should be one of the slow songs, although slow and Slayer put together really doesn't mean a bad thing like a lot of some reviewers have seen to think. And this isn't surprising for the band, since Los Angeles was pretty much a war zone in the start of the 90s. It's a stark, blunt depiction of sort of the cruelty and sort of the waste of gang violence and the pointlessness of futility. Next up is Sked Din Mask, a chilling soliloquy about Ed Gein, the sort of the Plainsfield Butcher of the early 1950s. And Tom's vocals pretty much take on a detached, ghostly, sort of droning quality, which honestly fits the song really well. Well, perhaps too well. The voiceover at the end of sort of gains sort of captives of the song sort of leads into more of a gruesome, sort of gaspy ambient. And it's just a sickening deathly urge. And then we go into Hollowed Point, which rips wide open, hammering you from all directions. And the lyrics are pretty graphic, seemingly sort of a demented tale of a mass murder, and is one of those classic Slayer songs that you just need to thrash around to. And the last half of the album for which I know a lot of people probably hate me for this, kind of seems to lose a little bit of momentum, but it still provides like a nice sort of like kick to the teeth, especially with Skeletons in Society, which is a post-apocalyptic tale about the world falling into pieces, which at the time I'm sure was very appropriate and could easily be like a set to a montage of news footage with some like recent events that are happening today. Temptation is not exactly a blindingly fast scorcher, but at the same time not sort of like a South of Heaven type of like funeral march. It juggles between the two styles, and due to a studio mistake, Tom sort of like tracked like two different vocals on this album. The first take was supposed to be erased because Carey sort of had his own idea for how Tom should sing the song, but the first take remained with sort of like Tom re-recorded his vocals, and sort of like double tracked vocal lines creates sort of like a spooky vibe, which I thought was pretty interesting. Born in the Fire is sort of like a short, simple, straight to the point thrasher, sort of like making another return of sort of like the satanic lyrics of like Slayer's like past albums and stuff. And to be honest, this song is forgettable compared to like the last song on here, which is the closing like monstrous overpowering title track, which is a doom laden forbidding opening section with some very haunting well played clean guitar lines, sort of like conjuring sort of like a picture of a deranged killer sitting in the hideout, surrounded like sort of dismembered bodies before his victims, ripping his own face to shreds and screaming at nothing but sort of like the dead audience spread around him. And this is one of Slayer's longest and definitely sort of like darkest songs ever. And I read somewhere that this was inspired by the crimes of Ted Bundy, but whoever the inspiration was, it was perhaps one of Slayer's most intricate haunting song. Now, overall, The Seasons in the Abyss by Slayer is another good album in Slayer's discography, much one of the best in the thrash metal in general, like very classic in their discography. And I know there's like a lot of like dissension over this album. Some fans love it, some others despite this, which a lot of people says it's sort of like a commercial edge, which I think is bullshit. And I strongly suggest this album for all Slayer fans who are a bit more like open-minded, and for like thrash fans in general. If I were to give this a score, I'd probably give this a solid 9 out of 10. And I actually really do enjoy this album. But yeah, that's my review of Seasons in the Abyss by Slayer, guys. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about it, and I'll see you all in the next video, and keep it metal.